was the end of the day on a Friday, closing time, afternoon, 5 p.m. And I was called into my boss's office. I walk in, I sit down, and he looks at me and says, "Today was your last day working with us. Hello, and welcome to My Daily Walk, the show where a Hollywood guy, that's me, walks around and talks about anything and everything except the things." Boy, I have not nailed that intro. I'm tempted to even start this episode over, but I'm not going to. No need. You can all bear with me, right? If you're listening to me now, then you're bearing with me. And if that made you tune out, then so be it. Let's do that again. Welcome to My Daily Walk, the show where a Hollywood guy, that's me, walks around and talks about anything and everything except the things I'm contractually bound to conceal. If you want to get in on the conversation, add some thoughts to the official record, send me an email at mydailywalk@thiswaytv.com. That comes straight to me. I read them all. At this point, it's easy to read them all because this is really just the beginning. Who knows where this show will go? If an audience finds this and grows and accumulates, and at some point that audience decides that they want to interact and chime in, then I anticipate reading emails will become cumbersome, potentially, at some point, too much to manage, at least to put into an episode. But right now, if you email and have anything at all to say, that will be read on Friday, not today. But that's just getting business out of the way. Quick reminder, if this is your first time listening to My Daily Walk, each day is a different theme. Monday is a meditation on some spiritual topic. Tuesday, today, is a life lesson, a snippet of something I've gone through in my life that perhaps I or anyone else might have learned from or might learn from. Wednesdays is topical. I've got a long list of topics that I'm chomping at the bit to get to, but I just can only do one at a time. Thursdays is, well, my one audience member so far. I do have someone who's listening to every one of these, and that person indicates, it's my mom. Yeah, why say that person? She likes Thursdays the best. Well, at least she indicated in a recent email. She likes the Hollywood theme Thursday. It's just a peek behind the veil of Hollywood, behind this shimmering, glorious veil. Yeah. Well, yeah, some of it's cool, some of it's like, it's just like any other job. That's Thursdays. Fridays is freeform, plus I read emails, and Saturday is Saturday free stuff. Kind of random stuff happens on Saturdays. That's the outline of the show. Again, email me at mydailywalk@thiswaytv.com. Today's topic, I'll get to it a little sooner than normal. Usually I babble on for about 5 minutes before I get to the tease or satisfy the tease. The tease is at the beginning. So it was a Friday. I'm not going to tell you how long ago, but it was, every now and then you come to those pivotal moments in your life. Usually they catch you by surprise, or you had no control. I guess I had some control. Well, so I had this job that I had been working at for about 3 years. Career type job, probably the first real career type job I had. I'd had other jobs that I suppose could have turned into careers, but I never viewed them that way. This one, I went into it, that was, this is a career, do I say what it is? It's a construction job, an office job for a construction company where I was responsible for multi-million-dollar projects. Yeah, so that was cool. I mean, I guess it sounds cool, but so I went. I started the job. It was interesting. Just I can find interest in just about anything, but it was interesting. It was a good job. I needed the job. Other things in my life required that I have a job of this type. I was making decent money at the time, but that job, it kind of got old, if you know what I mean. After acclimating to the tasks of the job, and it's stressful having to solve disputes, being the point man and being green, kind of a trainee, really. It's a multiple year training program, but still also being expected to be responsible and make the right decisions and say the right things. I mean, you get it put in situations where you represent your company to people who are not the competition, but they're the other side of a story. If you have changes on a construction job, who pays for it? Who caused the change? Anyway, I won't bore you with all that, but there's a lot of big decisions that may be made, and that's great. Some people love that kind of work. I love problem solving, so it was interesting for a while, but I had made a few mistakes that cost the company some money. I guess to be understood, I'm a trainee. I mean, there's plenty of excuses that can be made. I made legitimate mistakes, but one mistake that I remember making was, I remember the scenario very well, and I should not have been left on my own to make that decision. I remember the circumstances. The person that would have supervised and signed off on any decisions I made was not able to be there at that time, and it was crunch time, and it all fell to me, and I was like, okay, well, here we go. You put it in my hands, and I think I'm doing the right thing. And sure enough, I had made one mistake that cost the company some money, and that's just the reality. I'm not saying this. I wasn't fired. I was laid off. I had a good relationship with my boss and his boss. We had a good relationship. I mean, they are the ones that hired me, and I think the layoff was more, they could tell my heart wasn't in it, and they didn't give me any warning. I was like, today is your last day. They gave me a severance, to ease me out and into something else. But whoa, that's at that point I had a child and a wife, a child, and a mortgage, and I was the sole breadwinner. And you take a box to your office and put your personal effects in it and put it in the car, and actually it was a company car. I never remember. I guess I drove it home and drove it back. Somehow I got home. I got their car back to them. Anyway, but whoa. But I remember that day more for something else. Something else happened that day that I actually remember more than that moment of walking in that office completely blindsided. Today is your last day with us. So what was the thing that happened? Well, about a week earlier, I guess it was a week or two earlier, a friend of mine had handed me a flyer that he found, and he thought I might be interested in this subject of. It was announcing speaker, a screenwriter from Hollywood who had a movie coming out, was going to be in town at a venue doing a lecture. Is a guy who talked about storytelling in Hollywood from from a spiritual, I guess, a spiritual point of view. And he broke down one particular movie. Well, he had his own movie that was just about to come out, so part of his presentation was showing a few scenes from his film, and it had some known actors in it, so this was legitimate. And but there's another very popular movie that he used as his outline for his point of view. Anyway, so this is a guy who had some success in Hollywood, and he was coming around and sharing information. And there's maybe 100 people in attendance at this thing at a hotel conference room, and I'm like, wow, this is a real Hollywood screenwriter. A little bit of background before that, maybe 6 months before this, I had actually started writing my first screenplay. I was teaching myself to write, had a story in my heart and in my mind, and I was probably about halfway through this story. I had the whole story outline, but I was about halfway through writing the first draft of my first draft ever of any screenplay. I'd written short stories in school and stuff, but this was like full-on feature-length film, figuring out how to do it properly. I was about halfway through that in my free time as a hobby, away from job and family, and then this happens, this layoff, and then lo and behold, that same night happened to be, I got that flyer for the speaker. It happened to be the same night. It was Friday night. I'd gotten laid off at 5 p.m. and this thing was happening at, 7 or 7:30. And so I drove home. Don't remember if I called my wife ahead of time or walked in and told her. I don't think I called. I think I just walked in and I said, I got laid off today. And when something like that happens, your whole life is changing. There's nothing you can do about it. There's just this sense. It wasn't a sense of dread. It wasn't a sense of dread. It was a sense of, okay, my life is going in a different direction. Let's see where that is. Let's see what happens. And I don't know if she pulled out the flyer or if I found the flyer. It was a quick decision. Literally got in the car, turned around, and drove to this thing. And she came. We brought our small child with us, and she said before we left, these are the words she said that I will never forget. I may not have them verbatim, but they're pretty close. She said, I don't want to get 10 years down the road and that I would be the person that kept you from pursuing your dream. Something like that. I don't want to get 10 years down the road and have me, referring to herself, be the reason you didn't pursue your passion or your dream. And those words sunk in and forced me to think, what does that mean? What is my passion? What is my dream? And then this flyer pops into our hands, and let's go listen to this Hollywood screenwriter. And so I enjoyed every moment of what he had to say. The guy's very insightful. And then afterwards, typically, those in attendance who were, want to have, shake his hand and say hi and get a piece of advice or something, lined up. And so there's a line of people at the back where he, was shaking hands and smiling and nodding and greeting and doing that thing. And I was not interested in waiting in line, but I waited. I wanted to talk to him, so I waited until the line was gone. And then I don't remember everything I said, but I basically said, I probably said, I just lost my job, and I think I want to, I want to work in Hollywood. I want to be a writer, or I don't know. I want to work in Hollywood. And he said one thing that set me on a path. Well, he asked a question. He says, well, where do you live? And I told him where I live, and I said, well, why don't you live in Hollywood? If you want to work in Hollywood, why don't you live in Hollywood? That's all he said. We parted ways and moved in with the in-laws, found people to rent the house to keep the mortgage payments going, and for the next year and a half, I was trying to figure out how to get to Hollywood. I finished that first draft of the screenplay, and I finished a second draft, and it's been a couple drafts. That was the first stab at writing a story. I had started teaching myself how to edit on Final Cut Pro. It had just come out, like professional level editing software available on a home computer. That blew my mind. So I had purchased that prior to getting laid off, and had worked on a few home movies, and was figuring that out. And so I cut a few more videos, and ended up, somebody saw something I edited, and I was working on two skills: the writing and the editing, the post-production. And it turned out to be my post-production, my editing skill that was recognized first, and that turned into a job in Hollywood. About a year and a half, probably about a year and a half after that encounter, that layoff. Living with the in-laws was challenging, but bless them. Nothing wrong with them. We all have our own foibles and issues, and living with people is different than knowing people. Don't ever move in with your friends. That's a piece of advice I've heard that I understand. But if you move in with somebody and then become their friend, that's the perfect scenario. That had happened to me. Anyway, tangents abound. So, fast forward, I'm working in Hollywood, and then I get this job that's technically in Hollywood, but it's working for like a boutique production company, a small little production company that does, one of the things they did were opening credits for movies and TV shows. They did some very, very high profile TV shows and a couple of films. If I said them, everybody would recognize them. And so getting that job was like, oh, this is cool. But it turned out to be a little different. The company had multiple offices, and some of the other offices did those really cool projects. The office I worked at worked for a very large client that had a lot of content to produce. I'm not going to say who it was, but it's not exactly what the website boasts when you get that job, but still was a job. It was a decent job. But what I found was nobody in this company had worked in TV. At least not the type of TV, the type of content they were producing, I was experienced with. I had lots of experience. I was the most experienced person at this company in that type of content. But I was, for one reason or another, looked down upon or not. I think when they hired me, they hired me to replace these two other editors. I brought a friend with me. I hired a friend alongside me that I knew could, follow orders, do the job. In fact, that guy has moved on to be very successful as an editor. But so we were hired to replace these other two guys, and I find out later that I was getting paid less than those other two guys. And I mean, I was working my way up as an editor. I had not really. I'd had one job as a full editor before this, two jobs, I had been an assistant editor, a junior editor, and done some editing. And so I was hired as an editor, but I wasn't getting paid the full editor rate. And I understood the guy who hired me was a friend. And this job came with benefits. It was a contract. It's not common in Hollywood to get benefits through a job unless you get in the union or something. But so I got this job and it started out, great. And then I would make suggestions like, what, we should do this, we should do that based on my experience. We're having, the experience in that type of content. I would make suggestions all the time. And it was as if they'd fall on deaf ears. But then like a year later, exactly what I suggested, somebody else would suggest, and it would happen. It was like, okay, well and that happened regularly at this job. And I worked there for 4 long years. And I was it was growing. They started with 2 editors. They started hiring other editors. And I started finding out they were hiring these other editors with actual full rates. And I was training these people. how to do the job. I am venting a little bit here, but because I would find out that these people were hiring people and paying them almost double what I was getting paid, and I was the supervising editor. And it was just very, very, very difficult. This was a miserable time in my life. It was like, I'm barely making ends meet, but I'm making ends meet. I have a job. I have a contract. I have benefits. It's like, my wife was like, if you don't like it, just quit. I'm like, I can't. It's just not in me to, I don't know. And then one day, I don't remember what time of the day. I think it was the middle of the day. I get called into the boss's office, and this is your last day with us. This is your last day with us. A deja vu. But not really. The other job I got laid off from, I didn't really like it, and this job I didn't really like. And so it was shock to everyone. Like all the editors I worked with, the boss brings some guy, some crew guy that happened to be in the office, and they made him follow me to my desk to make sure I didn't steal anything or do anything. I had my own personal hard drive there, and they're like, what's this? I'm like, this is mine. This is my stuff on it. You want to look at it? Whatever. But I went around to each person and said, it's been nice working with you. And they would look up in shock. Every person. It's been nice working with you. I was their boss. I was like, and I had great relationships with all my coworkers. To the last one of them, they like, when I would say that, they'd be like, oh yeah, that's funny. Some of them would be like, oh, you're joking. I'm like, no. In the boss's office, he said, this is your last day working for us. I think you know why. And I said, no, I don't actually. Could you please elaborate? And he didn't have anything, nothing. It was like, and to this day, and I don't advise this, but I hired a lawyer and sued because I had a contract that they violated and got a settlement. I don't advise, if you want to, don't sue your production company if you're working in Hollywood. I shouldn't say don't sue. Gosh, I'm digging a hole for myself. Here's the thing. If you want to work in Hollywood, sometimes you just got to suck up some really awful conditions. I've worked, at one point, prior to this job, I had worked, I think it was 14 days straight, minimum 17-hour days. No overtime, no benefits. This was just a set weekly rate. But because the guy I was working for, I knew would hire me again, or that he would do right by me. I knew he had a need. I knew he didn't have a budget, and he required me to work these shifts to get this one show off the ground. It was all on my shoulders, and sometimes you got to suck that up. And I did, and the show got on the air, and that guy made me an editor. I had become like the or the lead assistant editor on this show, and I got the thing off the ground. And then he hired me on the next season of that show as an editor. So sometimes you just have to endure under sucky conditions, especially in this town. But that doesn't mean you should take abuse. And so, but this scenario with this guy who he had no reason. In fact, the client that we worked for praised my work above everybody else's work. We won awards on stuff that I edited, that I produced. Stuff would be handed off to me, and it was all up to me to make something out of it. Like, they'd bring me the footage from a shoot, and I'd load it in the machine. It was all on me to make something out of it. And we won awards for one particular piece of content. And then this other piece of content that I produced that I pushed back. We need more resources. This is an amazing story. You need to go get more, blah, blah, blah. And they did. And that ended up being the client's favorite piece we ever produced. And that was, a few months later, I got fired. Anyway, so I rant and I vent. But let me tell you, just like that other layoff, this one, though it was more shocking and more painful and more frustrating for me, was the best thing that could have possibly happened. In the same way that first layoff led me in the direction that I wanted to go with my life, that now I'm satisfied. I'm not working on roadway construction, but I'm doing things that I'm more passionate about. In the same way, getting fired from that boutique production company steered me back into the fold of where I should have been working. I found a couple jobs right away. My rate started growing to where it was supposed to be. The contacts I was making and the recognition of my work, my work would never have been recognized. Even though the client loved my work at that other place, my bosses, for some reason, had it out for me, had it in for me, or were out to get me. I don't know. I don't understand. I don't hold resentment now. It may sound like it, but I'm over it. I would work with that guy again. I would hire that guy. Seriously. But it came to being fired to redirect me in the direction I'm supposed to go. There is no question in my mind that was supposed to happen. We don't know why it's happening when it happens, or it's shocking, but sometimes your last day is the best thing that can happen. That's the only way I can put it. We have decisions. We are presented with decisions every moment of every day, but there are decisions that affect us that are completely out of our control, and we need to take the circumstances as they come and respond appropriately. That's the only power we have. We're not responsible for what happens to us, but we are responsible for how we respond. Right? We have a responsibility. We have a duty to treat others with respect, even when they don't treat us with respect. That's the evidence of maturity, and I would say that's the evidence of something beyond just the human existence. There are some things that are inexplicable by purely human, by using purely human terms. Like, what human would say, do good to those who do evil to you? That's not a human concept. I can't, it's just, what possible benefit is there in that? Well, there's a benefit if you understand. I can't. I'm looking at the clock. It's ticking down. So much more to say. No, I think I've said my piece. What am I going to call this one? Today is your last day with us. Something like that. You know the title. Signing off. Life Lesson Tuesday. MyDailyWalk at thiswaytv.com.